Olá, espaçonauta! Gente, hoje o nosso assunto é Artemis, né? Missão Artemis. E Artemis II, obviamente, como não podia deixar de ser, né? A gente está, pessoal, a menos de uma semana do lançamento dessa incrível missão tripulada à Lua. A primeira em mais de 50 anos. Então, assim, já está começando a ficar difícil de dormir pensando nesse lançamento, viu? Então, vamos lá. A gente tem muita coisa para falar. Bom, primeiramente, os astronautas chegaram hoje, dia 27/3, né, ao local de lançamento, ao Kennedy Space Center, na Flórida, já em preparo para o lançamento da Artemis II, no dia 1º de abril. Eles vieram a bordo dos caças T-38, né, juntamente com a equipe reserva. Para quem não sabe, a NASA sempre escala duas equipes, né? Isso desde a época da Apolo. Então tem os 4 astronautas oficiais, né? E tem 4 substitutos, uma equipe substituta. Se alguém da equipe principal adoecer, tiver algum problema, eles trocam e vai a equipe substituta. E a equipe substituta, ela faz os mesmos treinamentos, tá bom? Então eles chegaram, vieram 4 caças aí T-38 com 2 oficiais em cada, né? 2 astronautas em cada, sendo que 4 eram a equipe oficial já da Artemis II, né? A Christina Koch, o Ray Wiseman, o Glover e o Hansen, né? E 4 são os substitutos, ok? Bom, após aí desembarcar do caça, eles participaram de uma rápida coletiva de imprensa ali, onde falaram rapidamente sobre a missão que vão fazer em breve e responderam perguntas dos jornalistas. Eles ainda estão de quarentena, pessoal. Então, assim, tanto que vocês vão ver nas imagens aí dessa chegada deles que eu estou mostrando para vocês, os microfones que eles falaram, ele está afastado do resto da galera. Para quê? Para não ter esse risco de contaminação, né? E aí essa quarentena, de fato, ela termina já na véspera do lançamento. Até lançar, eles não têm contato com ninguém diferente, só com o pessoal lá usando máscara e tal, né? Na sala limpa, essas coisas assim. Bom, a chegada dessa tripulação hoje, né, a praticamente 5 dias aí do lançamento, demonstra que a NASA está de fato confiante que vai lançar no dia 1º de abril, ou pelo menos no começo de abril. Lembrando que a gente tem possíveis datas para lançamento aí. Dia 1º, dia 2, dia 3, dia 4, dia 5 e dia 6 de abril. Né? Então, isso aí indica que a NASA vai lançar dentro desse período. Eu estou achando estranho, porque ninguém falou ainda de um novo Dress Rehearsal. A gente tem várias coisas, amanhã tem coletiva com os astronautas durante todos os dias e não foi falado, apenas mencionado que a NASA está preparando aí para o lançamento. Não sei se vão fazer esse ensaio geral, se agora eles já fizeram os testes, alguns testes lá no VAB com vazão menor e tal, e não vão precisar, mas estamos de olho aí para saber o que vai acontecer. Tá bom? E eu queria compartilhar com vocês um vídeo de um evento que a NASA fez recentemente, me parece no dia 24, chamado Ignition. E nesse vídeo ela fala um pouco da Artemis II, muito pouco, mas também ela fala do futuro da exploração lunar pelos Estados Unidos, o futuro da missão Artemis como um todo, ou da Moon to Mars, que é a ideia, né, de ocupar primeiro a Lua e depois a Marte. E como esse futuro vai acontecer. Só que antes de eu colocar esse vídeo para vocês aí, que foi traduzido e legendado lá pelo nosso colaborador, o Alfredo, lá de Portugal, eu quero trocar uma ideia com vocês rápida aqui sobre alguns detalhes. Olha só, nesse evento, gente, a NASA colocou aí um monte de ações, comissões contínuas, comissões de entrega de carga e tal, muita coisa bastante legal. Vocês vão ver esse evento, ele está incrível de fato. Mas demonstrou mais uma vez que ela está perdida no ponto principal, né? Ela não sabe direito para onde que ela quer ir, nem como ela quer ir. Ela quer chegar à Lua, só que só sabe que eles querem ir. Olha só, aí vocês vão entender o que eu estou falando. Vocês podem às vezes estar falando, não, eu estou querendo falar mal da NASA, eu estou com raiva dos Estados Unidos, eu sou fã da China. Nada disso procede. Eu sou fã de missão espacial. A César o que é de César. A China fez direito, eu falo da China. A NASA faz direito, eu falo da NASA. Se for a Coreia do Sul fazer direito, eu falo da Coreia do Sul. E quem fizer direito, eu falo aqui. E quem não fizer direito, eu vou criticar. E esse é o momento de criticar mais uma vez o que a NASA está fazendo. Tá? Olha bem que vocês vão concordar comigo. Durante o Ignition, uma das coisas que eles falaram lá, foi anunciado que não vamos mais ter uma estação orbital lunar, que se chamaria Gateway, que era o projeto inicial da NASA para o Pouso Lunar. Para quem não sabe, nem nunca ouviu falar de Gateway, eu vou explicar. Ela seria uma estação espacial na órbita da Lua, onde o lander lunar estaria ancorado permanentemente. Lander é a espaçonave que pousa na Lua. No caso, é a Starship Lunar ou o próprio Blue Moon MK2, ou ambos. Então, os astronautas iriam a bordo da Orion, sairiam da Terra, a bordo da espaçonave Orion, atracariam ali na Gateway, e quando eles fossem descer para a Lua, para o solo lunar, para fazer um EVA, para trabalhar, para fazer qualquer coisa na Lua, eles iriam nesses módulos de pouso, aí, nesses landers, no Starship, no MK2, seja lá qual for, né? E aí fariam tudo que eles tinham que fazer e voltavam, retornavam para a Gateway na órbita, né? Depois, na hora de ir embora, pegava a hora e vinha embora para a Terra. Legal demais isso, né? A ideia é muito bacana, mas eu desde o começo achei uma ideia muito grandiosa, uma coisa muito grande, muito cara, né? E a NASA, gente, já tirou a Gateway do projeto há um tempo atrás, falando que ia cortar gasto. Depois eles não conseguiram arquitetar essa parte do pouso lunar e voltaram com ela. Não pegou bem na época, né? A galera detonou, falou mal. E aí colocaram ela de volta. Só que é o seguinte, gente. A NASA, ela não decide se vai ou se fica. Mas qual que é o problema, né? Se tirar a Gateway, tirou. E aí eles vão fazer de outro jeito. Beleza. Só que é o seguinte, galera. A NASA já comprometeu entre 1 a 2 bilhões de dólares até fevereiro de 2026, com aproximadamente 935 milhões de dólares ancorados publicamente só no contrato da Halo, que é uma das partes aí da Gateway, dessa estação espacial lunar. Tá? E aí, parte das coisas já estão prontas, né? Então, que coisas são essas? Componentes críticos do módulo chamado PPE, que é o Power and Propulsion Element, né? Em português, algo como elemento de energia e propulsão, que seria aí um dos primeiros módulos do núcleo inicial da estação lunar Gateway. Ele seria responsável por gerar e gerenciar eletricidade para a estação espacial, principalmente via painéis solares, sistemas de distribuição de armazenamento e tal. E também o Halo. O Halo é o módulo de habitação e logística da estação lunar. Essa sigla aí, Halo, vem de Habitation and Logistics Outpost, ou posto avançado de habitação e logística. As funções aí desse módulo Halo, são 2 módulos, tá? As funções desse módulo Halo seriam, ela é um espaço habitável, pressurizado, onde os astronautas iriam viver, trabalhar, igual lá você tem na Estação Espacial Internacional, na ISS, né? E eles iam ficar ali por períodos curtos durante a missão Artemis, né? Fazer alguns pousos na Lua e depois voltar para a Terra. Suporte a operações, né? Então ele ia abrigar racks, armários técnicos, estações de trabalho, interfaces para sistemas de veículo, áreas de interface para cargas e consumíveis, manutenção, movimentação de equipamentos, né? E também ele teria portas de acoplagem, o que a gente chama de docking, né? Ele ia funcionar como um hub inicial para acoplar das naves e futuros módulos, né? Porque aqui a gente falou de 2 módulos, mas outros módulos deveriam ser construídos. O Halo, gente, inclusive já existe como hardware, já existe um equipamento lá, só que ele está sendo equipado e finalizado por dentro, né? E futuramente ele ia fazer uma integração com o PPE, né? E depois disso, o Halo e o PPE iam ser acoplados de fato e testados como um conjunto antes de serem lançados. Mas calma, né? E aí, a NASA vai jogar isso fora? Não, a NASA é genial, gente. Ao invés de colocar esse aparato aí na órbita lunar, ela vai direcionar, vai plantar isso lá no solo e vai virar uma casinha de astronauta. Tá? Não que eu esteja ridicularizando a ideia da base lunar. A gente sabe que a base lunar é uma coisa muito importante, mas não desse jeito que a NASA está fazendo. Gente, no solo, ela vai acoplar o quê? Está cheio de sistema para docking, ela vai acoplar o quê no solo? Não vai cumprir a função. Vocês entendem que jogou dinheiro fora nessa brincadeira porque planejou mal? Parte do que gastou e desenvolveu lá vai ser obsoleto. Né? Tá, eles vão adaptar. E aí, para adaptar, vai gastar mais do que já tinha gasto. Né? Então, conclusão. Gastaram com a Halo e jogaram o dinheiro no ralo. A verdade é essa. Tá, mas e aí vamos pensar numa outra coisa. Como que fica a estratégia de pouso sem a gateway? E esse retorno à Terra, como é que fica isso? Ô, gente, complicado. Porque se a gente não tem gateway, o pouso lunar pode acontecer com a Orion mais o lander, encontrando ali na órbita lunar, fazendo o que a gente chama de rendezvous e acoplamento. E aí o retorno à Terra também seria de volta, seria feito com a Orion, como era naturalmente com a gateway, né? Que é o veículo natural lá de reentrada, tem escudo e tal. A Starship Lunar ou o MK2 da Blue Origin, que são os veículos que a gente tem, né? Os HLS, né? Os pousadores, né? Eles não iam ser acoplados com escudo para poder pousar na Terra, né? Ia ficar do jeito que está. A forma mais simples e direta é o seguinte: a Starship Lunar e também o MK2 ficariam alojados ali na órbita da Lua. Os astronautas iam com a Orion, tá? Até um desses 2 landers aí, acoplariam diretamente neles, né? E depois pegariam a Orion de volta para vir para a Terra. Né? Acoplariam neles, mudariam, né? Passariam para dentro deles, né? Desceriam na Lua, fariam o que tinha que fazer, depois voltava, acoplava de novo, pegava a Orion e vinha para a Terra. Tá, se era simples assim, por que pensar na gateway antes? Para mim ainda tem caroço nesse angu, tá? Para mim ainda tem caroço nesse angu. E outra coisa, a NASA continua com essa bobagem de reabastecer em órbita. E eu vou falar isso para vocês, gente. Isso para mim é um trem muito complexo. Eu acho que eles não vão conseguir fazer isso tão cedo. Envolve muita coisa, não é fácil de fazer. Tá? É possível, claro que é possível. Hoje em dia a gente abastece caça em pleno voo, aí eles são reabastecidos. Mas em órbita a coisa muda, porque aí a gente tem a microgravidade, a coisa é mais difícil de fazer. Mas vamos ver, né? Eu só não acho que isso aí sai pro ano que vem, igual eles querem pousar na Lua em 2027, no final de 2027. Não acho que sai, tá? Bom, quem viver, verá, e é o que a gente vai ver pro futuro aí, né? Tá, agora, gente, eu vou colocar para vocês o evento aí, o Ignition da NASA, que foi esse evento onde eles fizeram esse anúncio e vários outros, né? E também foi discutido, de fato, o futuro do retorno dos Estados Unidos à Lua. Esse vídeo ele foi traduzido e legendado, como de costume, pelo nosso colaborador e amigo, né, colaborador aqui do canal, o Alfredo Lopes Moraes, de Portugal, que gentilmente cedeu mais esse trabalho aqui para o canal. Então, gente, No último vídeo que eu fiz, quase ninguém mandou um salve para o Alfredo, gente. Ah, que é isso, né, galera? Vamos lá, manda aquele salve para o Alfredo aí nos comentários, aquele agradecimento, porque o Alfredo tem contribuído muito aqui para o crescimento do canal aqui e para a gente entender aí essas coisas. Principalmente quem não entende inglês direito, né? Com esses vídeos do Alfredo aí, pode entender tudo que foi falado e são coisas muito bacanas. Então vamos para o vídeo, rapidinho.
Please welcome to the stage Acting Administrator of the Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate, Dr. Lori Glaze.
Good morning. It is so wonderful to see so many of our industry and international partners here today. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to talk to you this morning about the very first, most critical step in that vision that Jared just spoke about, the return to the moon. If I could have the next slide, please. On February 27th, just a couple of weeks ago, the administrator announced his bold plan to increase the cadence of missions under the Artemis program to achieve the national objective of returning to the moon, of returning our American astronauts to the moon and establishing an enduring presence. This includes standardizing our vehicle configuration, adding an additional mission in 2027, as Jared just alluded to, and undertaking at least one crewed surface landing every year thereafter. The revised sequence enables a more rapid cadence to retain our muscle memory. We've talked about our muscle memory that's been developed during launch and flight operations, and ensures that the critical landing systems are tested with crew before attempting operations on the lunar surface, dramatically reducing our mission risk. To enable these changes, as Jared just spoke to, NASA will engage in a concerted hardware, software, and analysis acceleration effort. The effort will redeploy the workforce to engage more directly with our providers, to provide relief if needed, and bring some of the manufacturing in-house if necessary. Looking beyond Artemis V, NASA plans to work with at least 2 launch providers, initially targeting landings every 6 months, with the potential to increase the cadence as the capabilities mature. NRFI has just been released at the beginning of this presentation, or should have been at the beginning of this presentation, to solicit information from our established commercial providers and new industry entrants to help shape NASA's long-term strategy to transition from government-driven missions to the commercially sustained lunar transportation ecosystem for Artemis VI and beyond. If I could have the next slide, please. We're following the proven stepwise approach that was demonstrated by the Apollo missions to methodically reduce risk incrementally and increase the likelihood of mission success. If I could have the next slide. With Artemis, we're applying the same stepwise approach. Each step needs to be big enough to make progress, but not so big that we take unnecessary risks given and based on our previous learnings. In this model, Artemis II, as we all are aware, will demonstrate Orion crewed operations, including critical tests of environmental control and life support systems and manual spacecraft maneuvering as part of a proximity operations demonstration prior to the translunar injection. Artemis III is now being replanned as an Earth orbit test flight, demonstrating integrated launches with rendezvous and docking demonstrations with one or both of the lander providers. Artemis IV will perform the first crewed landing in early 2028, and Artemis V is targeted later in 2028 to further accelerate towards establishing the lunar base. If I could have the next slide. I'm going to take a couple of moments to talk about Artemis II. Near and dear, this is the very first critical step in the success of this plan. We've got to successfully complete Artemis II. And I got a lot of great things to tell you about it. Next slide. Came to my realization over the last couple of days. I've been talking about launching on April 1st for a few weeks now. And then the last couple of days, I just kind of came to my mind, that's 1 week from tomorrow. 1 week. Yes. I can tell you I was just out at the pad last Friday as we rolled the spacecraft back out to the pad. We've been tracking it day by day in the preparations leading up to launch. And I can tell you that as of this moment right now, there are no major issues that we're working. We are doing everything according to plan. We're following the plan. We'll be watching the weather very closely over the next week. We'll also be staying alert for anything that may go a little astray. We want to assure that our astronauts, our 3 American and Canadian crew, are all safe for this mission. We've already passed our final big review, the flight readiness review, on March 11th and 12th, so that milestone is behind us. And we are now, as I said, aiming for April 1st. The launch window extends from the 1st through the 6th, and there should be about 4 attempts possible within that 6-day period. If we can go to the next slide, thank you. So I'll give you just a little bit about the mission plan for Artemis II. I like to basically break it up into about 4 phases. I'm not going to speak to everything on this slide, but we can think of it in 4 different parts. The first part of the mission is the launch, and then we go into this 24-hour high Earth orbit. While we're in that high Earth orbit, we are going to check out the environmental control and life support systems. This is the newest piece for Artemis II and the critical piece for supporting our crew and keeping them safe and healthy throughout the mission. While we're in that 24-hour orbit, we will also conduct the proximity operations demonstration. Once we have separated from the ICPS, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, our upper stage, we will use the manual controls in Orion to approach and then regress and then approach the ICPS to see and get better feel for how those controls respond to the crew's direction. Once we're confident that all of the systems are operating within the Orion spacecraft at the completion of that 24-hour orbit, we will perform the translunar injection, which sets us on a path to the moon, around, and back, where we'll use the moon's gravity to bring us back. It's a free return trajectory. So that second phase is about 4 days out to the moon. And then we have the third phase, which is the lunar flyby, where we'll get to observe the far side of the moon and hopefully break the record, the Apollo record, for the farthest any human has ever flown from Earth. And then we begin the cruise back, about another 4 days back to Earth. The final part of the mission is the re-entry to Earth's atmosphere and splashdown off the coast of San Diego in the Pacific Ocean. We'll work closely with our partners at the Department of War to recover the crew, bring them safely to shore, and return them to Johnson Space Center. So I hope you all have as much excitement as I do. I'm starting to get goosebumps. Please stay tuned and watch along with us over the coming week. And I hope to see many of you at the launch next week. If I could have the next slide. Oh, it's up already. Artemis III, as we mentioned, is now a new Earth orbit docking demonstration in 2027. And we're really excited about this mission. And I want to talk about all the preparations we've already made and how ready we are to execute on this mission in 2027. The hardware for Artemis III is very mature, and we're working to meet the 2027 launch readiness. As soon as we complete the launch of Artemis II, we will assess the condition of the mobile launch pad. We made significant changes to ruggedize the mobile launcher following Artemis I, and so we anticipate the ability to turn the pad around very quickly and begin preparations for stacking of the Artemis III rocket. The Space Launch System hardware, the rocket hardware, most of it, a lot of it's already at Kennedy Space Center. We'll have a lot more of it there very, very soon. The interim cryogenic propulsion stage, the ICPS, is ready. We may need it for Artemis III, we may save it for Artemis IV, but it is ready. The boosters, the solid rocket boosters, have been ready for a while. They were just waiting for space in the vehicle assembly building. We anticipate shipping those and receiving them at KSC in April, later in April. The engine section for the core stage for Artemis III is already in the vehicle assembly building undergoing integration work. The RS-25 engines are ready and they're shipping in April. The top 4/5 of the core stage should be shipping from the Michoud Assembly Facility in April, actually a week or two after the Artemis II mission completes. We expect to receive those down at Kennedy Space Center, the core stage. And the launch vehicle stage adapter is also ready in storage at Marshall Space Flight Center, and we anticipate that shipping to KSC as well. Next slide. Our Orion team is also working hard to meet the challenge of a 2027 launch. All elements are already at the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building at Kennedy Space Center, and significant progress is already underway. The Orion service module is in testing and checkout, making great progress. The heat shield that you see in the middle here has completed its fabrication and assembly, and it's in its final preparations to be ready to be integrated into the Orion crew module. The service module is also being integrated and tested. So we've got the service module, the crew module, we've got all the piece parts. We are in that integration stage. The next slide, please. Of course, in order to perform this important docking demonstration, we are going to partner closely with both of our human landing system providers. The goal for this mission is for Orion to dock with one or both of those landers, and both of the HLS providers already have been given a task. They were given that task immediately following Jared's announcement to assess the options for this new Artemis III mission profile. In preparations, we're watching closely the development of both lander systems. The Starship flight test number 12, we anticipate happening in April, hopefully, no earlier than, but hopefully in April, will be the first flight of their version 3, which is a major step towards a lunar landing capability. The Blue Origin, Mark I, which is their predecessor to the Mark II human lander. They've invested a great deal in the Mark I lander and anticipate launching that within a few months. Very excited. It's going to be flying one of Nikki's CLIPS payloads. And we'll be watching. There's a lot of commonalities with the systems needed for the human lander that will buy down risk with this Mark I mission. Back in the fall of 2025, NASA already began working with both of the providers to accelerate the human landing to 2028. Those accelerated landers are what we will be using for the Artemis III rendezvous and docking demonstration to buy down the risks. Have the next slide, please. So as soon as the administrator made his announcement, we began actively assessing the specifics of the mission profile and the objectives that can be addressed in this mission. The new mission will endeavor to include a rendezvous and docking with one or both commercial landers, as I said, from SpaceX and Blue Origin. It will include in-space tests of the docked vehicles, an integrated checkout of life support, the docked vehicles, the communications, and the propulsion systems. We also really hope to be able to include the new extravehicular activity suits in the landers to help reduce future risks on their development. NASA will further define this test flight after we complete the detailed reviews that we are conducting right now actively between NASA and our industry partners. And the agency will, of course, share the specifics, the specific objectives for the updated Artemis III mission in the very, very near future. The primary objectives that we're considering as part of this mission profile include things like demonstrating the multi-launch campaign coordination. This is not simple. We need to have multiple rockets launching in a coordinated fashion such that we can all meet up together in space at the same time and place. Of course, the Orion rendezvous and proximity operations with the landers in orbit is one of the primary objectives. We want to work through crewed docking operations. We would really like to test those surface suits if possible. We'll be testing the critical lander systems and lander vehicle performance while in Earth orbit. And we'll be looking at performance of the new Orion permeable heat shield. We have the new, more permeable heat shield we'll be flying on Orion for Artemis III. And while the Earth orbit won't put quite the demands on it that we would have returning from the moon, we will gather important data on the performance of that heat shield. We'll also get practice in increasing the mission cadence with a prompt turnaround of the pad and the ground systems, really pressing that system to do a quick turnaround. And we've talked a lot about the muscle memory, and with this mission we'll really demonstrate our ability to support the increasing mission cadence. With Artemis IV in early 2028, NASA has undertaken an effort to work with both of the HLS providers to request and assess their proposals to accelerate the lander development. Jared referred to that earlier. This includes modifications to our requirements and then also to the surface things that we want them to do on the surface and how we want them to work with us. We've got requirements to the hardware, the mission definitions, capabilities that enable us to move faster. We're really focusing on how can we move faster. The intent with this change, with trying to pull these forward, and working with both providers, is to fly with whichever provider is ready first for 2027. We've already made significant progress on the government side of the hardware that's required for Artemis IV, both on the SLS and the Orion. The solid rocket booster segments are complete. The aft skirts for the boosters are in their final production. The core stage engine section for Artemis IV is actually already at Kennedy Space Center. The RS-25 engines are in storage. The top 4/5 of the core stage are in their manufacturing at Michoud Assembly Facility. And the Orion crew module is also in its final assembly at ONC at Kennedy Space Center. And the Orion service module that's provided by our European partners is also well into its integration in Germany. We had Artemis IV is here at KSC. Sorry, getting lost in my track here. We've got a lot of stuff here. Artemis IV is here at Kennedy Space Center, where it's already getting integrated. As I mentioned, we only have one more ICPS. We're in the process of determining whether it would be used for Artemis III or IV. But as part of the plan to standardize production of the transportation system, the exploration upper stage that was previously planned for Artemis IV has been replaced with the Centaur V, which is a proven capability as part of the ULA Vulcan launch system. Right now, all of our programs are actively engaged in understanding what modifications will be needed to be implemented in order to transition from ICPS to the Centaur V upper stage. The new generation suits are being developed by Axiom to support NASA's lunar surface extravehicular activities. This is a significant effort and critical to our ability to execute the first landed mission. NASA is accelerating this effort, and we're providing direct support at Axiom facilities and suppliers to increase the collaboration and accelerate hardware production. The Axiom suits are being planned for checkout, as I said, hopefully on Artemis III, or possibly additionally on the ISS. The suits for the mission for Artemis IV will be delivered to the human landing system for integration. Again, both of our providers for Artemis IV are working on simplifying their profiles to accelerate the initial landings and those surface capabilities. The primary goal of this mission for Artemis IV is to execute the first crewed landing since 1972. While in orbit around the moon, the two crew will have two crew transfer from Orion to the commercial lander, and then which will safely transport those two crew to the surface of the moon, and then ultimately bring them back to rendezvous with Orion in lunar orbit. While they're on the moon, the two crew will demonstrate surface operations, including deployment of science instruments and conducting an integrated surface science campaign. Both of the providers are required to complete a successful uncrewed landing prior to carrying any of our crew. We've been looking and talking with both of the providers. SpaceX has been considering alternatives of their current Starship design, of the HLS Starship design, while implementing a more streamlined approach to try and speed things up and pull things forward. The Blue Origin approach implements existing capabilities that they have today as a stepping stone toward their eventual full capacity architecture. We've asked both teams for feedback. How can we help simplify these missions, and how can we speed up the landing? And the overarching themes that we've heard from both SpaceX and Blue Origin were, first off, can we please avoid the near rectilinear halo orbit? Can we please avoid NRHO to help reduce the HLS workload, what's required of that system, and also improve lunar surface mission planning flexibility? We've also heard that simplifying the mission requirements for this initial mission while maintaining their long-term capability is also a strong desire. We want to simplify, but we also want to make sure we're building towards the future. So it's important to assure that whatever architecture we're using for Artemis IV feeds forward to what's going to be needed in the future. In response to the feedback that we've received from SpaceX and Blue Origin, we are indicating, and we have indicated to both of them, that we are open to other non-NRHO lunar orbits. Some of these orbits could reduce our crew risk with abort opportunities that are available in hours versus up to a week if we were in NRHO parking orbit. It also opens up flexibility in surface mission planning, allowing us perhaps access to different sites on the surface or flexibility in the timing of when we land. The intent of offering alternate orbits is to balance the Orion and lander performance by parking closer to the moon and being able to have that more frequent or easier access. We're also looking at the surface requirements, trying to make them simple and sustainable. We're looking at more flexible surface planning that supports simplified interfaces, leading to accelerated development. We are, of course, also looking for maintaining that long-term capability. So the simplification of the requirements allows us to focus on achieving the near-term goals while also preserving the long-term goals through evolution of the lander capabilities to support our exploration goals. Looking forward in working with the providers and with our teams within NASA, we're very focused on looking at the cross-program and mission planning. There are critical Orion interfaces, and those interface definitions need to be updated. They require being updated to trying to understand what it means in these new parking orbits that are closer to the moon and different mission profiles. So we're in the process of assessing that all right now. Moving on to Artemis V, which would be the second landed mission in late 2028, as we begin our preparations for a lunar base. There is significant hardware, again, already in development for Artemis V. Orion Crew Module, European Service Module, this one is in Germany still, but we expect it to be delivered next fall. They're on an excellent yearly cadence of providing those service modules. We've got engines in production, boosters in productions, and the core stage already also in manufacturing. So I'd like to wrap up here. I just want to hope to close with the impression that you'll take away that we are enthusiastic and excited to execute on these accelerated timelines. The new Artemis III mission standardizes the architecture and will reduce risks ahead of the first lunar landing. We have the hardware, we have the skills, we have the capabilities to accelerate, and we know this administration is committed to removing any of the obstacles that are slowing us down. We're also prepared to advocate for increased supply chain criticality, and we're poised to deploy the NASA workforce to build components ourselves if necessary. We're already embedding NASA personnel at key contractors and suppliers as active, not passive, participants in the supply chain to assure that the key components that we need are not keeping us from landing on the moon first. Internally, we're in the process of building new analysis tools that provide us insight and real-time resolution of challenges across the entire Artemis enterprise. And to assure that we're all moving and working toward the common goal, the administrator has invited the company leaders from each of our prime industry partners to brief him within the next few weeks on the actions they're taking to meet the accelerated schedule. As I noted at the beginning, we're signaling demand and dropping an RFI for 2 pathways for crewed missions to the moon beyond Artemis V. The first step in this journey begins with the Artemis II launch on April 1st, when Reed, Victor, Christina, Jeremy embark on their historic journey around the moon. I hope you'll be watching. I hope you'll be watching very closely, hopefully from the Cape, as we lay the foundation for Artemis 3, 4, 5, and beyond. And as Administrator Isaacman has said repeatedly, we may not have captured full global attention yet, but I'm absolutely certain that as we embark on Artemis 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the coming years, we will captivate the world. We're honored to have you working alongside us to further world-changing science and discovery. Thank you.
Please remain with us. We will be coming back after a brief 10-minute break.
It shall return.
This is a live look.
We will see things that no human has ever seen.
We want to know what's out there just beyond the horizon.
Amazing live views from the spacecraft.
Coming back to Earth, say we were doing like 5 or 7 miles a second. Those are just not numbers that humans generally think about.
We were always going to the moon.
Pushing ourselves to explore is core to who we are.
It's in our nature.
It's a part of being a human.
And liftoff.
6 million pounds on the pad, 250,000 miles.
Boosters have separated.
When humanity sets big goals, we can accomplish extraordinary things.
Welcome to the stage, NASA Moon Base Program Executive, Carlos Garcia Galan.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Carlos Garcia Galan. I'm your moon base guy. The first thing I want to do, though, is I want to address the Gateway program. National space policy is prioritizing sending astronauts back to the lunar surface and also building an outpost on the moon. When we evaluated the current Gateway architecture, which is focused on building an orbiting outpost, while that is still relevant for future exploration goals, is not required to accomplish our primary objectives. As a result, we're announcing today that NASA is pivoting the Gateway architecture to focus on building the moon base. We're going to focus the resources, the people, and all of our efforts on the surface and any orbital supporting elements to achieve that. There were other considerations that we assessed when making this decision. For example, the HLS providers and the performance penalties that we're incurring in trying to get to the orbit that we had selected for Gateway, and some other challenges that are still ahead of us with developing the modules and putting them in orbit. For example, right now we were projecting to achieve the first initial capability in 2030s. And as you're going to see today, we have a lot of things between now and then that we want to be focusing on. Consequently, we're going to be starting to work on evaluating what is it that we have today in terms of hardware, capabilities, facilities, and we're going to basically shift those to be focusing directly on what we're going to do on the surface of the moon. NASA, working together with our industry partners with Gateway and also our international partners, are going to be putting together options and concepts on how we take everything we got and we make it work for us towards building the moon base. Many facilities that we were using were already designed for an evolving architecture with the orbiting outpost, so those will be easy to transition. For example, our laboratories that we were going to use for integration test verifications, we're going to be transitioning those. Also, we have significant amount of hardware in advanced state, like the power and propulsion element, which you're going to see later on today how we're going to transition that to meet one of our near-term objectives. In addition, the habitation and logistic outpost module, which is also being built here in the United States. There's many subsystems and components that potentially we could use in other habitation modules for the moon base. So all of that is just beginning today. We're going to do it together with our partners. And in addition to like hardware and facilities, the NASA Gateway team, it is going to pivot to also focusing on our objectives on the surface of the moon and some of the other things we're going to hear about today. Additionally, we're working with our international partners to basically make this transition together, figure out how we repurpose the partnerships that we have, and we go hand in hand in this transition, this pivot to the surface of the moon. Having said that, let's talk about the moon base. President Trump's vision for space exploration requires that we establish the initial elements of a lunar outpost by 2030. What you're looking at today is certainly not the initial elements. It's more of our vision of what it would look like in the future. So when you look at this picture, I'm going to ask you a few times today to transport yourselves to the future and to the lunar surface. When you look at this picture, it's very clear that to execute this vision, we're going to need to achieve the near impossible. But this is what we do. We're NASA. We're going to have to deploy systems in very high cadence that will survive extremes in temperature, illumination, and very complex and rugged terrain with very steep slopes. Everything that we're going to want to do in the moon, unfortunately, is hard to get to. So all of these things we're going to have to do together. And eventually support permanent astronaut habitation there, which is no small feat. We can only do this with a vibrant American industry base and our international partners. And in addition to that, we're going to leverage the entire might of the NASA workforce, from core competencies to facilities to our ingenuity, to make sure that this dream happens. We're going to ensure that American leadership remains in space and on Earth, leveraging doing things that today seems like science fiction. It does look like science fiction, but guess what? We're planning to turn that into reality. And with your help, we're going to inspire the world in the process. But this picture of the moon is not going to show up overnight. That's not where we're going to end up. We're going to build it in phases. Phase 1, which starts today, it's all about getting to the moon reliably, learning how to get there in high cadence, deploying assets in different areas of the moon where we think we may want to build this moon base. We're going to experiment with new technologies that we know we're going to need for future infrastructure development to support that permanent habitation. And we're going to actually start the infrastructure in this phase that goes from now to 2028. That infrastructure is going to start with constellations of communication satellites that can also do observation. Transitioning to phase 2, which we estimate will start around 2029, we're going to think about establishing the infrastructure. So we've tested some new technologies. We're transitioning to actually establishing and laying out what we think are permanent elements of that infrastructure. And we're going to talk about this, but it includes power, surface communication, surface preparation, and mobility. And then once that's established, we're going to transition into achieving semi-permanent and permanent crew presence on the moon base. So that is going to include habitation modules and everything we need to keep the crews alive and enable them to do groundbreaking science and exploration on the surface of the moon. Go to the next chart, please. So the moon has a surface area about the size of the continent in Africa. Imagine, talking about why are we going back to the moon? Imagine sending 6 missions to Africa for short duration and saying, hey, we've explored, we've learned everything we need. We're going to start doing that again. The lunar South Pole, for example, it's about the size of the state of Virginia. So I think you can go one page up. Oh, there you go. We got it. This false color image that you see is the dramatic terrain that's in the lunar South Pole. The Shackleton crater, for example, is one of the areas where we're interested in going. That is double the depth of the Grand Canyon. I don't know if any of you have had the chance to hike the Grand Canyon. I have. So it's quite impressive, and we actually want to explore in the areas of the bottom. We're going to have to build systems that also provide power, mobility, and habitation around those places, and also consider lighting. Like you see today, some of these areas that are very interested for science and exploration are sometimes permanently shadowed or have significant length of shadow periods. So having systems there that can survive the temperature gradients that we're going to see and the lighting are going to be critical. Unlike the lunar equator, the ratio of sunlight can really wildly change. And when the sun comes up, it's not like on Earth or different places on Earth where you see it just straight sunrise or the equator of the moon. It's going to basically hover in the horizon. So power systems and even communication having to go through those craters to work is going to be very challenging. So let's talk a little bit about phase 1. Go one more slide. Phase 1, these are the top-down objectives to establish the types of things we're going to need in the missions that I'm going to talk about in a minute. We want to achieve high-rate, reliable surface access. Talked about that. Establish the ground truth for the moon-based landing sites. We have a ton of data from satellites, a little bit of data from rovers and other probes and landers we've sent, but there's nothing like going there and experiencing that environment that I was talking about, and prospecting and looking around. So we need to do that in phase one with a high rate of assets. We also need to test and experiment on the technologies that we think we're going to need. They're not a nice to have, they're a must have. We got to make sure that we understand how those are going to work in that environment. And we're going to host the first crewed mission to the South Pole in this phase. So if you're an astronaut, transport yourself back. If you look at the perimeter of the moon base, you're basically going to see, of course, your ride to the moon and back to Earth. You're going to see other landers that were there before you, and then several of other landers and rovers that we were using to achieve that high rate and that prospecting. So this is kind of what it would look like. To achieve that, go to the next slide. We're investing significantly and projecting about 25 launches, 21 landings in that period of time. We're going to put about 4,000 kilograms of payloads on the surface. So the payload capacity is going to drastically change. We're hoping changing the paradigm of what we've been able to do on the moon. We're going to also deploy 2 lunar orbital comm satellite constellations to have reliable comm and observation. And then we're going to do technology demonstrations like radioisotope heating units, which are key to address some of the challenges we were talking about before. If you go to the next slide, these are just imposed on the picture some of the things that we're planning to do. I talked about the constellations that will give you navigation, comm, and observation. We're going to have drones on the moon, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. Well, of course, we'll have the human landing system. We're going to use the CLIPS program that we have today, drastically expanding that to do that high cadence of landers. And then we're going to do a series of different demonstrations. And some of these key missions I'm going to talk about in more detail in a minute. But certainly the radioisotope heating units to survive the night, lunar terrain vehicles, rovers of different kinds, all of those are in our plans. Go to the next slide. I'm going to start talking a little bit about some of the key characteristics of the key assets that we want to put in there. So lunar terrain vehicles. These vehicles are about the size of a golf cart. There's 2 versions of them. One is going to be crewed, and one is going to be uncrewed. The crew version, of course, is going to allow the astronauts on an EVA suit to move around farther distances from their landing site, potentially going from the landing site to the areas where we're going to start setting up some of the elements of the moon base. And the uncrewed version, equally important, is where we're going to be able to do exploration and prospecting. We're going to put payloads on them, maybe some of the technology demos. Imagine perhaps a lunar terrain vehicle with an RHU attached to it, or maybe carrying something related to surface preparation to see what things work and what things don't. Can this thing, push a rock on the moon? Can we level? Those type of things we're going to explore. And here you have some of the key characteristics, 500 kilograms. It can go up pretty steep slopes. 20 degrees doesn't seem like a lot, but if there's any cyclists here, you know that that's pretty impressive. Surviving 150 hours in the shadow and about a speed of about 10 kilometers per hour. Let's talk about the next one, lunar drones. We're calling this Moonfall. So I'm pretty excited about this one. This is built on the legacy of the Ingenuity helicopters on Mars. Obviously, we can't have helicopters on the moon, but we're going to take everything we learned from GNC systems and the avionics, all of that, to build this. It's going to be used for site surveillance and terrain survey. We want to send this to places that are hard to reach, which is, by the way, points where maybe are the ridges where we see more sunlight, or maybe are places where eventually we may want to put a lunar cellcom tower. So we're going to send them to do the prospecting, and potentially they could host a variety of payloads as well, like an RHU, for example, to further survive the night. Here's a video with some of the characteristics. So the drones themselves are going to be independent from each other. They're independent spacecraft. We'll bring them in and basically deploy them as the spacecraft is coming in. And each drone is going to be capable of basically several propulsive hops that can go about 50 kilometers each in total. And then it's about 150 seconds from launch to landing on each hope. And then eventually we'll place them in a place when we run out of fuel, where maybe they can, if they have something that allows them to survive the night and stay longer periods of time, we can leave them there and have a function, like maybe communications or something like that. Of course, everything we talk about is going to have pretty awesome cameras. The next one is that I want to talk about is communications and observation satellites. Communications is key. We can put all the assets we want, but if we cannot get their data back, or even look at prospecting from the top to see what things are doing, or bring you along for the ride, we're going to get much lower value of that. So building a constellation of satellites, we're very, very used to this on Earth, as you know, GPS, communications anywhere in the world. We got to establish that on the moon as well. So we want to increase the throughput to about more than 500 megabits per second. We want to increase and establish a good amount of surface lengths to orbit lengths, and basically being able to communicate with our assets anytime we want. We're also going to start establishing protocols. So, I mean, all the stuff we're going to put on the moon, we want to make sure that it's, standard. And even though the initial set may not have those requirements, we want to test some stuff in phase 1. So maybe by phase 2 or 3, we can deploy those protocols and have a unified comm system on the moon as we develop other capabilities. If you go to the next one, another one I'm excited about, the Viper rover. Viper is also another golf cart-sized rover. It's built, it's tested, it's ready for a ride, and now we're going to give it one. It's going to go in the Blue Origin lander, serial number 2, which is scheduled to go to the lunar South Pole by 2027. What it's used for is going to map the water and volatiles from lunar resource prospecting. And these are critical for some of the reasons why we want to go to the moon. Some of these areas that have permanent or semi-permanent shadows have things that are billions, volatiles that are billions of years old, and we're going to go after those things and to try to understand our universe, where we come from, our neighborhood, to say in a different way. So yeah, this rover is going to get deployed. It's going to help us do a lot of the prospecting and trying to find out where are the cool places to go do science on the moon. Next one, radioisotope demos. I talked a little bit about the lighting conditions on the South Pole, very challenging. So lighting, of course, is related to also the thermal environment that these assets are going to see on the moon. As a matter of fact, at the beginning, during phase 1, some of the things we put there are not going to last very long because of this very reason. So anything we can do to not rely necessarily on solar power and allow the assets to get heating and maybe some power is going to be golden for our ability to take that forward. So we're actually trying to incentivize any of the people that have landers, if you can find an RHU or anything related to that that works for your asset, bring it on, and we're going to reward you for that. As a matter of fact, also, we're thinking of several things along this area, but I'm going to talk about this later too. We're going to put an RFI today, dropping it, for any ideas that you may have. We want to hear them. So anything in this related to this technology area is going to be good. Basically, we want to put things that will help the lander survive more than 120 hours of continuous operations in darkness and be able to send signals back to Earth. Let's see. Let's go to the next chart. So all in all, this is phase 1 for you. It's very challenging timeline that we completely understand that, but as I show you in the first picture, we need to achieve the near impossible, so we cannot operate the way we've been talking and operating until now. We're committing about a $10 billion investment in these years through 2028. In 2026, we already have 2 missions planned to the South Pole using our CLIPS program that we're folding into the moon base. 2027, we're drastically increasing that mission cadence with 10 launches to put 9 landers. And all of this we're going to do depending on what we get from solicitations, the stuff we have on the books today. So these numbers are obviously approximate. In 2028, we want to maintain that cadence and potentially do 12 launches to put 10 landers on the surface including the HLS-provided landers for demos and, of course, to bring the crew for the first time. Go to the next chart. Okay, let's talk about phase 2. So, all right, we've learned how to get to the moon reliably. We've tested technologies. Now we're transitioning into, we're building the moon base. So we're laying out infrastructure to be able to support the habitation modules later. We're going to drastically increase the CLIPS lander payload mass capacity to about 5 metric tons. We're going to use some of also the heavy cargo landers, so there's a lot more than that coming. But from CLIPS perspective, we're wanting to increase the size of the landers and their ability to take cargo. We're going to do technology demos to enable lunar permanence, and we're going to, at this point, we would like to increase our crew visits to the moon base, doing it semi-annually, so 2 missions per year. Top objectives. All right, back to the moon. Think about if you were an astronaut, what would you look at if you're looking at the moon base? So you saw some of the rovers that you saw in phase 1. Maybe some of them are not working anymore, but they're still there. You see additional rovers with increased capability. Definitely you see lunar terrain vehicles that have been hard at work, maybe preparing the surface for a potential habitation module or multiple modules we're going to connect. You see some of the infrastructure that's coming about, like solar tower masts and so forth. So if you go to the next chart, that's about what it looks like. 27 launches, 24 landings, 7 rovers, and drastically increasing the payload capacity that we want to put on the lunar surface. By this time, we would like to also have, you see, a pressurized rover that we're doing with our partners at JAXA. You see solar power stations. Definitely, we're building up on this nuclear capability, maybe graduated from RHUs to RTGs, maybe something else, if we get good ideas from you guys. So we'll start setting up this kind of infrastructure. And some of the assets, if you go to the next chart, in addition to what we did in phase 1, we definitely have solar power augmentation. So you start seeing some of those solar masts growing. We'll have RTGs, maybe on a rover, maybe on a lander, maybe some things that we can connect together. We start seeing some of the infrastructure like surface communications, our cell towers, which also give us the ability to do navigation. Pressurized rovers, of course, excavator rovers. So we need to, connecting things on the surface of the moon is going to be almost harder than on orbit because you got to deal with the terrain. So we're going to work on the technology for that, but also having an even surface, even if it's just clearing up rocks, is going to be key. Site preparation logistics rovers, logistics, if you want to have a vibrant moon base, you have to have a logistics train. From launches to in-space transportation to landers, and then getting that cargo from the landing site to where it needs to go. So using perhaps LTVs or an extension of other rovers, we're going to have to experiment and start setting that up from when crews are coming there. All right, so transition to, let's talk about the assets that we're going to have there. Of course, one of the great ones is the pressurized rover that, again, we're doing with our partners in Japan. It's a mobile habitat that is going to extend the human exploration range. They'll be able to work in a short sleeve environment, so it's kind of a habitation on wheels. And that will allow them to travel significant amount of distance. Of course, it will have power systems and so forth. We're designing this to have a 10-year design life, and it's about 15 metric tons. So, of course, to deliver that pressurized rover, we're going to have a heavy cargo lander already in the books. Can traverse quite a few degrees of slope and then survive up to 150 hours in the shade. The whopping speed is 3.5 kilometers per hour. But trust me, if you're in that, you probably don't want to go any faster. So anyway, pressurized rover. Transition to solar power augmentation. Power is the name of the game. All of these things we're showing require power. Some of them require power to heat themselves during the long shadow periods. So we need to demonstrate the ability to deploy these systems, test them, and then chain them together eventually to be able to provide the power that we need for the moon base. So anyway, we're definitely going to be investing in this capability, deploying it, testing it. we're looking, when we deploy some of those permanent assets, we're looking at about 10 kilowatts plus during illumination. And then when we're in the shade, 360 kilowatt hours for the assets that we want to serve. You're thinking, okay, we have habitation modules, so it's for that, but we also have a bunch of rovers. So maybe having stations where the rovers come in, hook up to it, either with, cables and connectors or wirelessly, and charge up is some of the things we're going to have to do. All right, next. In the theme of infrastructure, which is really the theme of phase 2, surface communication. So we want to establish and expand the network to enable more throughput, more connections, constant communication with our surface assets. We want to deploy dedicated surface-to-orbital communication stations, and you see a little bit of a picture of that in the landscape, and deploy the system for direct communication across the surface. And again, I talked about earlier with craters all over the place, which is where we want to be. It is going to be hard to achieve. There's a lot of multipathing. There's hard to find line of sight places to communicate directly. So all of that, even though we all know communications, doing it on the surface of the moon in the South Pole is not going to be easy. We're looking at perhaps 10-kilometer range of direct line of sight. That's what we want to achieve. All right, and then one of my favorites, the site preparation and logistics rovers. We're already starting. I'm going to show you a video of that later. We're starting to experiment with this on the ground. So these are rovers that are deployed to start working on surface prep. And we want them to last long so they can be working for us while the crews are preparing to launch to come to the lunar base. We're thinking this is a key capability for the lunar terrain vehicles, the upscale version 2 that we want to be deploying during phase 2. And also, we may want to be doing some excavation and compaction. I know this is very challenging in 1/6 gravity. We know that. We're testing, like what you see here, and you'll see in the video, is like double drum to even that stuff out. But there's many challenges that I'm sure you can come up and have maybe good ideas that we want to hear about. We're going to be investing in this capability as well. And then, if you go to the next chart, nuclear surface power capability. So we talked about experimenting a lot. Maybe the beginning in phase 1 is really just to heat yourself while you're in the long lunar night. But now we're going to want to be working on these things to supply power to multiple assets so they can survive the night, and eventually also provide power for operations. So we're talking about hundreds of watts, demonstrate technology, process, and operations at a larger scale, connected together, thermal management concepts for larger applications, anything related to systems that can give us a significant amount of power. So anyway, if you're working on that stuff, you'll be excited to hear that today. All right, so if you rack and stack phase 2, which goes from 29 through 32, 29, we're planning approximately 6 launches, 5 landings, 2 rovers. The cadence, the number looks smaller, but all of these systems are heavier. So we're more in the medium to large class of landers at this point. So the delivery of mass is greater, but the numbers are a little bit less. So 29, 6 launches, 5 landings, 2 rovers, 2 surface infrastructure elements. 30, 7 launches, 6 landings, 2 rovers, 4 moon-based drones with upgraded capabilities. 31, 7 launches, 7 landings, 2 rovers, 3 surface infrastructure elements. And in 32, 7 launches, 6 landings, 1 rover, and more drones. This may not be exact, but these are the numbers we're working for. And we want to show you the signal that this is the type of cadence we think we're going to need to develop this moon base in the timeframes that we want. So we're going to talk about challenges, and clearly it's perhaps out of our experience base. But that's where we need to get together, come up with the things, identify things that are slowing us down, preventing this type of cadence, working on that together, addressing it head on, and putting it in play. All right, phase 3. So top-level objectives. Long duration and long distance human exploration. We want to increase the CLPS lander payload mass capacity to 8 metric tons. We want to do a bunch of regolith manipulation and site preparation capable rovers. We want to start the routine logistic flights to deliver to Earth. And then we'll do initial uncrewed mission cargo returns, maybe up to 500 kilograms. So we start having a serious both ways train of logistics. Back to the moon. Just take a moment to really picture yourself in an astronaut suit, looking around and imagining what you would see there. Definitely see a bunch of infrastructure for power, both potentially nuclear, which is maybe shielded, to a bunch of solar array towers that are either directly connected to the habitation modules or perhaps on the side at different locations, providing power to some of the assets that are moving around. Pressurized rovers, advanced LTVs, and then different landing sites for human landings, cargo landings, and potentially launching cargo vehicles back to Earth with a bunch of moon regolith. This is kind of the stats. At this point, we're talking about 150,000 kilograms of payload on the surface when you account for all these things that we're talking about. One more chart. So again, some of the highlights that I've been talking about. Habitats, that's the highlight of the moon base in its end state, and what we're going to be focusing on phase 3. Logistics, can't talk enough about logistics and the need for that to do it reliably. We've learned anything we've done long duration, whether it's on Earth, low Earth orbit, we know we need logistics. So I mean, everything that has anything related to that. In situ manufacturing or resource utilization, we're going to start seeing some sites on the moon that are kind of like the industrial neighborhood, where we're trying some of that technology and also using it to actually keep the moon base growing and viable. We'll have different locations for habitats, and then widespread power distribution, and then we'll see an increase on communications as well, surface, and potentially we have additional constellations at this point. Okay, so the focus areas for phase 3, talked about logistics. I won't impress that upon you anymore, but we're thinking about 8,000 kilograms of carriers, consumables, and other items. Some of the challenging stuff is going to be to go get the stuff from where it is and put it where it needs to be. So when the crews come, it's there for them. And what we know from doing permanent habitation in low Earth orbit, for the crews, that you need clothes, of course you need water, you need air. There's a lot of mass for even short duration missions. Like a month, staying there for a month requires a significant logistics and supply capability. So if you go to the next chart, we'll talk about habitats, star of the show in this phase. So we want to enable continuous human presence there. We potentially are looking at multiple locations. We would like to expand into different modules that are connected together, but we'll evaluate if that's the best play. We definitely want to expand our capabilities in ECLS, surface mating, and of course, airlocks. We are, we're going to be experimenting with this, and of course, the pressurized rover and the things we have already done with ISS, all touch on these things, but it's going to be the next layer of complexity when we try to go to the moon. The basics, air, water, food, space, all of those things, a few nights in space, in the size of a minivan, it's manageable, but when we expand to short trips, those needs get much bigger. Let's see, I think I'm going to move to the next chart, cargo return. So initial demo we'll do in phase 2, but here we want to use it at full scale. So at phase 3, we want to definitely increment and implement a capability of a mass goal of 500 kilograms sustainably. So here we'll put our science returns, critical hardware, and anything we can do to inspire the world will have a place in our cargo return missions. All right, and then the last one, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but in situ resource utilization and manufacturing as well. 3D printing with regolith on the surface of the moon. It's something that we should be striving to do. So we'll experiment a bunch, and then we can hopefully put this into play for phase 3. This is something, when we talk about moon to Mars, clearly when we get to Mars, we're going to need some of this capability. And when you get there, it's going to be tried and true and something you can rely and count on. So that's what we're going to be learning on the moon, how to achieve that. Key commodities that we may extract from regolith, of course, oxygen, water in general, rare earth elements, hydrogen, all of those things we're going to experiment with. Next chart. So here's the timeline for missions in phase 3. So another about $10 billion investment in this phase. We're currently planning for a capability to include 3 new habitats, including the multipurpose hab that we're already planning, 3 more rovers, 2 more surface comm nodes. By 2033, for example, we expecting to add 2 rovers and our first habitat and supporting logistics capabilities, 6 landers, over 7 launches. 2034, we'll add our next habitat and supporting logistics, more surface communications. 2035, 1 more rover, perhaps another habitat, supporting logistics, and a bunch of launches and landings. And then in 2036, potentially more habitation volume and all the things that come with that. In total, when you rack and stack the 3 phases, this is what you end up with. So it's pretty impressive, equally challenging. Remember, trying to achieve the near impossible here. And this is what's going to take to accomplish this goal. So I'm not going to rack and stack these numbers for you, but you have it there. You're going to start getting your brain around it. All right, so the next chart. We talked about some of the things that we want to experiment on the moon. Of course, we can also do that on Earth. We've already started. So here's some videos of folks, NASA folks, and also some of our industry partners working in some of this technology, from rovers that can go up terrain, fuel transfer, regolith preparation, manufacturing, and all kinds of things, avionics, hardening. All of these things we're already investing in, and some of these things, surface mating and docking, some of these things are ready to go to get, they're just waiting for a ride and a lander to get to the lunar surface and basically showcase what they can do, and that's what we're going to start with. Okay, so here's all the cool aspects of putting assets on the surface of the moon and traversing and potentially experimenting with what we're planning to do in the 3 phases. I could watch these videos all day. All right. So one of the key things, you go to the next chart, one of the key objectives that we have is not only to develop the technology that we need to eventually go to Mars, establish a moon base, which we have never done in deep space. It is imperative that we inspire the next generation of engineers, communicators, explorers. We can only do that if we take you along with us. We're going to basically require that every asset that we have has a bunch of cool cameras, things that will give us the perspective of what we're doing, which to date is almost like science fiction, and things that will inspire people that are currently in college, high school, middle school. It's like, wow, that is what I want to do. That's what I want to dedicate my career and my life to do. And they will be the ones that come up with some of these challenging things that we don't know how to solve yet. So we're going to have a website that we're starting already working on, where you will be able to follow us along the way, from launches to things getting to the moon, to the rovers prospecting, getting to places that we have never seen. We're going to enable that capability with constellations of satellites that are looking down at the moon base and checking out what things are doing. We're going to follow the drones, the moonfall drones around the moon, to see where they can get to and what they discover. And all of that, you'll be able to do it along with us and hopefully eventually work with us in some of this cool stuff. We talked, go to the next chart. We talked a little bit about, when I show you that phase 1, 2, 3 collated set of missions and all that stuff, it's a huge challenge, and we know that. To achieve the near impossible, we are driving to high volume of complex missions with challenging execution timelines. We know we're going to stress the supply chain. Maybe as of today, supply chain is not ready for this. We're going to basically need to access reliable facilities that allow us to do the very unique testing that we have to do for surface operations. Manufacturing capacity and capability, technology maturation. All of those things we understand. That's why we dropped the RFI today, to get your ideas on what can we do better, what's slowing you down, what are things that could turn your capability to enable us to turn science fiction into reality. What are those things? Bring it to us. In addition to that, and you heard Administrator Isaacman talk about that earlier, we're going to use the NASA workforce in a way that perhaps we haven't in the past, especially recently. We're going to make sure that these missions are as reliable as we can make them. We don't want to impede the innovation from industry, but the things that we know how to do, we're going to embed. So we're going to really focus our NASA workforce to basically helping you in industry, providing solutions. If you want them to work in line, they will be working in line, and then also reviewing the things that you're doing to make sure that we have a good shot. We're going to take a lot of shots on goal. We want to win a lot of games as well. So we're going to put that into play, as well as we're going to do a review of our facilities. Some of them have unique capabilities that nobody else has, and we want to make those available for you so we can do this together. So again, we need your ideas. Drop them in the RFI. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what are we doing. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how we're doing it. So we basically structure this in different functional areas: transportation, launch, and also orbital transfer vehicles for whenever we need those, perhaps for logistics; surface mobility, transportation for landers; infrastructure, logistics, and habitation. So I'm going to touch on some of these things. If you go to the next chart, realize that we've actually been working a lot of this stuff for a while. Today, there's teams, projects, programs that are working on all of these things individually. What we want to do, and this chart is not to project a future org or anything like that, the point we want to make here is that every asset, every kilogram, all the lunar exploration resources that we have are going to be focused on one thing, and that is to build the moon base. We're going to partner with our science teams to really think about what are the capabilities we need, what are we deploying, what's the science that should go with it, and put it all together. If you go to the next chart, I'm going to basically step through some of these things. For launch and transportation, we're planning, you saw the launch cadence, which is pretty significant. Moonbase will leverage Kennedy Space Center's launch service program and the deep space logistics projects to their expertise to manage, sustain commercial lunar delivery services. Building from our reliable surface assets with access, which we're going to set up and starts in phase 1, we will manage a commercial mixed fleet strategy that enables diverse, flexible mission support, standardized delivery interfaces. We're also thinking that, we're going to help with, perhaps helping with, get the landers, get the infrastructure, and maybe have basically a conveyor belt of landers, payloads, ready to launch, put them in the rocket type of thing. Moving forward, of course, landers, key thing. Here's a picture of some of the things that we have been projecting through CLIPS and HLS, things we have today. Low mass, medium class, and heavy class landers. If you go to the next chart, the CLIPS program is one of the tools we're going to leverage pretty heavily. So originally, CLIPS was set up to enable low cost, more risk tolerant lunar payload delivery opportunities, basically to incubate new US-led industry base to work on landers and capabilities to deploy them. What we want to do requires a lot more than that, so we're drastically expanding the CLIPS program. So the lander payload delivery capability is going to now go through phase 3, potentially beyond. We want to increase mission reliability, and that starts now. We're putting things in the contract updates that we're doing to allow you to leverage the NASA expertise for both inline work and also, us looking over things that you're doing and areas where we can help. Also to increase the mission quantity and cadence. To achieve this goal, I'm gonna have some procurement charts also coming up, and we're gonna talk about extensively tomorrow, but we're gonna release 2 new requests for proposal for task orders to support phase 1. So it's taking what we have today with the current providers and expanding that. And then we're going to structure a way in which you can leverage on the NASA workforce more than you could before. And then we're going to release a follow-on CLIP solicitation to support phase 2 and 3, where we're going to open up again and expand the pool of providers potentially that can bid on those things. So definitely a was-is for CLIPS. And hopefully you'll get to read the solicitations and the stuff we're putting out today and be excited to participate in this building the moon base with us. All right, large cargo landers, not going to talk about much of this because this is already in play with the HLS program. So, quite a bit of capability that it's in process of being available for, especially for phase 3, for phase 2 and 3 for us. Go to the next chart. Transportation elements. So we talked about the land services. We'll have new lander opportunities with the solicitations that we already talked about. And some of the CLIPS deliveries are kind of summarized here. And again, we'll focus on the details all of this tomorrow with open sessions and also closed sessions with existing providers. Next chart. Okay, infrastructure. So here's where we're going to talk about communications and also power. So I'm going to step through this. And in these charts, I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution that we are looking for. So when we talk about communications, here's the different things we're going to have wholesale at the different phases. So phase 1, we talked about the constellation of comm with observation, and as a bonus, if we can get navigation, we'll strive for that. Then phase 2, you get to the definite navigation on the on-orbit constellations in addition to surface communication, and potentially we'll also entertain the possibility of doing an atomic clock demo. So eventually we can build up very reliable navigation system on the surface. So the evolution, if you go to the next chart, please. The evolution of this in phase 1, and I've talked through some of these capabilities already, but I wanted to kind of put it in a summary. So orbital comm, PNT, relay, deploy. We're going to deploy our initial 5 satellite constellation that's already in progress, and we're going to look to add a second constellation that's dissimilar to that. One of the things we want to do is get in there and put significant observation capabilities and start playing around with protocols that we can then count on in the future. Phase 2, we go to the surface for permanent surface cell towers, and then simultaneous support and comm from different assets. And then this is where we start building the navigation infrastructure. Phase 3, is the surface communications, expanded capability with standard protocols, and the same thing for navigation. Next chart is gonna dive into the surface power. So click one more, and of course we'll start with solar and regenerative fuel cell type of technologies. We will go into the RHU for heating some of our assets and RTG in phase 2. Definitely experiment in phase 1 as much as we can. This is a key infrastructure component. And then in phase 2 is when we're going to actually start deploying and linking things together. And then the fission surface power program, it's scheduled to deliver something on phase 3 for more capacity and maybe more than one thing. for the capacity that we'll expect we'll need for the moon base. Next chart. Here's kind of the phase evolution of that. So deploying the assets for communications, that's an infrastructure thing we're going to do in phase 1. Demo, nuclear, and other things that will allow us to do the survive the night and long shadow periods. Then we transition into the deployment of the power infrastructure on phase 2, solar and nuclear, and then, you know, completing that and distributing that to all the assets during phase 3. All right, mobility. There you go, one more chart. There you go. So this is the combination of all the mobility assets that we plan to have. So in phase 1, definitely a bunch of rovers of smaller size with different payloads and capabilities for prospecting and experimenting. We'll also have the lunar terrain vehicle. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, but we're going to change a little bit course on that, and basically we'll have incremental capability build up for the LTVs. So LTVs in phase 1, more capable LTVs in phase 2, and even better on phase 3. We're definitely looking for our international partners to also help in this area. This is a great opportunity. We're going to have definitely transportation capability by this point in phase 2. So looking for what are your ideas and capabilities that you want to deploy. And again, rovers, you know, from having prospecting to surface prep to carrying logistics around, something we're going to need. Science rovers, of course, that's why we're going to the moon for, to do the groundbreaking science. And then, of course, pressurized and advanced LTVs in later phases. Go to the next chart. Here's the evolution of that. During CLIPS 1.0, we already talked about delivering several rovers, including Viper, Flip, and the Rashid UAE rover. We were bringing in the drones, Moonfall. So those things I already talked about, what they would be used for. And then the LTV phase 1 capability, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute. Phase 2, more capable LTVs with increased reliability, service life, survive the night, payload capacity. Partner rovers, of course, including the pressurized rover. That's a big one in this phase. And then science of all kinds, and of course landers. And then phase 3, we are in an operating mode with permanent habitation there, so certainly anything you need in a moon base, crewed and uncrewed, of course, more surface preparation, a lot of things that can do logistics movement. And all along the way, partner rovers, we're open for business there. All right, for the LTV, I want to talk a little bit about the pivot that we're doing here. So the original contract was really set up to deliver a fully capable crewed rover to survive 10 years, so pretty hefty requirements. In our current schedule and the challenges to get to that state, we were projecting a delivery to the lunar surface by 2030. So you can see we've shifted in our objectives because we want to start right now and we need stuff in phase 1. So this approach really put us in a significant cost to deliver the one asset later on. A lot of technical complexity to I have to address immediately instead of build up incrementally. And schedule put us in a kind of a no-fail solution space. If the rover was late or if it didn't pan out, didn't have the capabilities, by 2030, we're going to need that capability pretty significant. So we're pivoting. Okay, so anyway, what we're going to do is to enable basically gaining quicker access to crewed and uncrewed. We're going to change the procurement strategy for that and basically talk to our partners that were already on board and talk about deploying, doing solicitations for much earlier, perhaps less capable rovers, and then incrementally build that. So we're changing the current contract today, and then we're going to put solicitations for a phase 2 of that, and then eventually we absolutely predict the demand of that, where we have to deliver an LTV, every certain months for the duration of the moon base. So pretty exciting evolution where we're going to need a lot more capability, just a little bit of a change from where we are today. And this is what it looks like from a procurement strategy perspective. I'm not going to read that to you. And again, we'll have sessions on this tomorrow. Next chart. Okay, habitation and logistics. So you go to the next chart. In the picture of the moon base, this is what we're planning. Phase one is when we'll start really working on the technology development and trying out things for logistics deliveries. Phase two, of course, we will have pressurized rover as a habitation kind of a demo and trial. And then phase three is where we get the habitats and then the cargo return. And here's the evolution of that. So phase two started deploying the logistics capabilities from 500 kilograms to 1.5 metric tons, demoing some of the things related to the logistics train, demo habitation with early capability and the press rovers, and then the build-up of that in phase three. All in all, if you go to the next chart, in the next few months, this is what the procurement opportunities look like. From CLIPS 1.0, expanding that for science payloads as well. Starting CLIPS 2.0, it's coming up. We'll be awarding that in this year, in the summer. Rephasing LTV procurement the way we had designed it. And then the moon-based capabilities, RFI, which we really hope you take a look at and give us your ideas, because you can see the next several years is going to be insane from the perspective of the amount of capability potentially we'll be able to put on the moon. So I hope that sends the signal to you that we want to work with you, we need you, we got to do this together. And we're starting with a significant investment to make that happen. And then, before I close out, I just want to reflect on the picture you're seeing and what that may mean. So, starting today, we're building humanity's first deep space outpost. We will learn how to reliably get to the moon, build habitation, systems and infrastructure that allow us to conduct groundbreaking science. We will take you along with us and inspire the world for generations to come. We have to do this, just as we did with the Apollo program when we first got to the moon. NASA's partners are essential to building the systems we need to live and work in the lunar surface. We're going back to the moon, we're going to stay there, and we invite you to help us build the moon base. Thank you.
We will now be taking a break for lunch, which is staged in the lobby, so please feel free to move about as you see fit.
Cara, a ideia é muito legal, né? Fica uma coisa que o Derek Wong lá da China comentou comigo é o seguinte, que ele assistiu também o Ignition, ele falou comigo assim, engraçado o tanto de vezes que o Jared Isaacman e o pessoal da NASA fala China. Você vê claramente que eles estão preocupados com a China. Mas isso também é uma coisa que eu vou fazer um vídeo, estou preparando já um roteiro especial para falar disso. Vamos só esperar o lançamento da Artemis e tal, aí pra gente, porque esses dias a gente tá muito conturbado e nós vamos ficar muito atarefados aí com tudo isso aí da Artemis, né? Já agradecer mais uma vez, gente, o Alfredo, tá? Muito obrigado, Alfredo. Falar para vocês que na descrição desse vídeo tem o portfólio, o link, na verdade, para o portfólio do Alfredo, convidar vocês para conhecer esse portfólio, que o Alfredo é artista plástico lá em Portugal, faz um trabalho incrível. E falar também o seguinte, se você precisa de um trabalho de tradução, de legenda, o Alfredo fornece esse tipo de trabalho. Pode contratar ele lá, que já deu para ver mais do que nunca aí que ele é bom de serviço, né? Então, qualquer coisa, contacta o Alfredo lá para ele fazer esse trabalho para vocês aí. Beleza, gente? Pessoal, queria chamar a atenção mais uma vez. Eu acredito que o nosso canal está sendo boicotado pelo YouTube. A gente está tendo muito poucas visualizações nos nossos vídeos, talvez porque eu tenho criticado muitas vezes o governo americano, a NASA, falado bem da China, nas coisas que eu preciso falar, e eu acho que talvez a gente esteja sofrendo retaliações. Mas você que está me assistindo pode mudar essa história. E como que você muda isso? É fazendo esse vídeo engajar, né? Usando o sacolão youtubístico, que é o quê? Sentou o dedão no like, apareceu o botão hypar, senta o dedão no botão hypar, compartilha esse vídeo para seus amigos, principalmente compartilhar, para trazer pessoas que não conhecem o canal para vir para cá, comentar para esse vídeo, dar engajamento e inscrever-se no canal para o YouTube entender a relevância desse canal e falar assim, pô, o cara é chato, ele fala mal dos Estados Unidos às vezes, mas o canal é bom e eu vou entregar porque ele engaja e ele tem relevância, né? Então vamos fazer o YouTube entender isso, tá? Então eu vou pedir a vocês encarecidamente, não deixem de deixar o like. Às vezes a gente tem num vídeo aí 500 views e assim, 10 likes, 15 likes, não vão fazer isso não, gente. Tá assistindo o vídeo, já senta o dedão no like, não deixa de fazer isso não, para ajudar. Isso ajuda demais, vocês não têm noção do tanto que isso grita no ouvido do YouTube que o canal é importante, tá? Falar para vocês também o seguinte, quem gosta de astronomia, gosta de observar, precisar de comprar equipamento, quer comprar o seu primeiro telescópio, é no nosso parceiro. Quem que é o nosso parceiro? A loja Photon Astro, a maior loja de astronomia do Brasil, tá? Lá na Photon Astro vocês vão encontrar binóculos, telescópios, oculares, filtros, adaptadores, tudo para astronomia, tá? E, ó, com o melhor custo-benefício do Brasil, tá? Então, na descrição desse vídeo eu já deixei o link para a loja, se você quiser comprar qualquer equipamento de astronomia, pesquisar, e também de 4 telescópios para quem quer iniciar. Comprando aí por esses links, a princípio vocês já estão comprando com desconto. Mas na dúvida, usa o cupom de desconto, que aí você garante mesmo, que é o NERD aos 50, tudo junto. Beleza, galera? Então é isso aí. Grande abraço, até o nosso próximo vídeo.